All right, hello everyone. Welcome back to the channel. We are now officially 3/4 of the way through 2025, and that means it's time for another Criterion Challenge update. If you're not familiar, the Criterion Challenge is a year-long project where you watch 52 films from the Criterion collection, each one tied to a different category. It's a fun way to push yourself outside of your comfort zone and finally check out some of those movies that might have been sitting on your watch list for way too long. For this video, I'll be talking about the 13 films I watched during the third quarter of the year. It was a pretty mixed bag, but overall I came away really surprised and impressed by a lot of them. I'll be keeping things concise, giving you a quick synopsis of each movie along with my condensed thoughts so we can get through all 13 films without it turning into an hour-long breakdown. So without further ado, let's jump in. The first film I watched this quarter was Summertime from 1955, directed by David Lean. And let me just say, someone please dig up the mythical 3-hour Lean cut of this film because I would watch every second of it. This isn't exactly the kind of movie I usually throw on for a Friday night, but it turned out to be the perfect way to kick off summer of 2025. The timing was kind of uncanny too. Summertime originally released on June 21st, 1955, almost 70 years to the day that I watched it. The story follows Jane Hudson, played by Katharine Hepburn, a lonely American visiting Venice for the first time. This was my first Katharine Hepburn film, and she's honestly incredible in this. Her voice, her mannerisms, everything I had heard about her really comes through here. One scene that gutted me in this film is when she sits alone at the Piazza San Marco, arranging the cafe table to look like she's not dining by herself. It's so small, so sad, and it kind of perfectly captures the longing that drives her character. Of course, this being a romance, Jane meets Renato, a shopkeeper whose charm is complicated by the fact that, well, he's married. Their relationship is passionate but messy, and it throws Jane into this tug of war between her American ideals and this more laissez-faire Italian outlook on love. Some of it hasn't aged gracefully. Renato's whole eating ravioli speech teeters between moving and kind of sleazy, but it's effective in showing Jane's conflict. But I gotta mention the real star of this film is Venice. Jack Hildyard's cinematography makes the city feel timeless. Every frame looks like a painting, and you could see how later films like Before Sunrise owe something to this one. The romance moves a little too fast for me, but the bittersweet ending at the train station lands perfectly. It's not a film that I'd revisit often, but it surprised me in all the right ways. It's gorgeous, it's heartfelt, and a reminder of how fleeting certain moments in life can be. Oh, and shout out to Jane's friendship with the little Venetian boy hustling trinkets on the street. It was unexpectedly one of the sweetest parts of the movie. Next up is Ghost Dog: The Way of the Samourai, directed by Jim Jarmusch and starring Forest Whitaker. Jarmusch has always been a filmmaker I admire more than I actually enjoy. His films tend to feel cool and detached, like I'm peering at them from the other side of a glass wall. But this one struck a balance that finally clicked for me. It's a crime film filtered through Jarmusch's existential lens, with Whitaker playing a hitman who lives by the code of the samurai. Beneath the brooding tone, the movie doubles as a meditation on change, cycles of storytelling, and how traditions are passed down from one generation to the next. The Italian mobsters represent the fading old guard, clinging to codes that no longer carry weight, while Ghost Dog emerges as a kind of new era enforcer. His philosophy is older, it's stranger, but still bound by loyalty and ritual. The text is also the subtext. Everything is changing, yet the beats remain the same. What makes the movie sing, though, are the details. There's Raymond, the French ice cream man who doesn't speak a lick of English, yet he shares this beautiful friendship with Ghost Dog. There's the mobster who screams every line, and Sonny, who for no clear reason knows all the lyrics to a Public Enemy deep cut. And that's Jim Jarmusch at his best, finding humanity in odd little quirks. My favorite moment is Ghost Dog's bond with Perline, the young girl he talks books with on a park bench. By the end, he hands her the Hakakuri, ensuring that his philosophy doesn't die with him. And whether it's through books, rap, cartoons, or cinema, the act of passing down traditions and stories feels like the film's real heart. This one was a doozy. The Friends of Eddie Coyle feels like a missing link between the classic gangster films of the 40s and the gritty crime thrillers of the 2000s. It's got shades of The Departed and The Town, but stripped of any glamour. Robert Mitchum plays Eddie Coyle, a small-time gun runner caught between the cops, the mob, and his own desperation. The film builds its tension not through shootouts or chases, but through quiet conversations in diners, back rooms, and parking lots where every deal has the potential to go sideways. The bank robbery sequences, though, are masterclasses in suspense. They're cold, they are methodical, kind of nerve-shredding, and there's a stakeout scene in this movie that had me on the edge of my seat the whole time. What really stuck with me is how unflinchingly bleak the film is. It's less about whether Eddie will get out and more about how and when the hammer will finally fall. Loyalty here is a myth, and every character is just one bad break away from betraying someone else. By the time the double crosses pile up, you realize there's no winning in this world, only survival. And even that doesn't last long. The ending of this movie genuinely left me slack-jawed, staring at the screen in disbelief. It's devastating, but perfect for a story that's really about the illusion of friendship in a life where no one's really got your back. It's a tough, unsentimental film, but one that lingers long after it's over. Mike Leigh's Secrets and Lies threw me for a loop. The first act kept me at arm's length. Characters like Cynthia and Monica swing so wildly between emotional extremes, and Leigh refuses to spell out the family dynamics in neat terms. It's sort of disorienting, even alienating at first, but once Hortense, played by Marianne Jean-Baptiste, begins her search for her birth mother, the story slowly pulls you in. By the time the film arrives at its climactic birthday party, I realized I'd been inching closer and closer to the screen without even noticing. Mike Leigh steers this story toward devastatingly earnest domestic drama when I sort of half expected something more farcical, like Death at a Funeral with secrets, lies, and absurd tension. Instead, what we get is painfully raw, sort of stripped of humor and soaked through enough tears to flood the Thames. Mike Leigh's style, at least from the two films of his I've seen, Naked and now this, feels deliberate in its stillness. The camera just sits and lets actors fully inhabit the characters, and when it works, it really works. The final sequence is a knockout, almost enough to justify the slow burn that precedes it. But not all of it landed for me. I gotta be honest, the first 30 minutes dragged, and more than once I caught myself wondering why this film is spoken of with such reverence. The truth is, the problem wasn't the movie, it was my expectations. This isn't entertainment in a conventional sense, it's emotional excavation, and that could be uncomfortable to sit through. But still, I can't deny leaving the film a bit cold, a bit drained, and convinced that Britain in the 90s may have been the worst place to live on Earth. Sam Peckinpah's Straw Dogs is a hard film to pin down. It's not something I could say I enjoyed. The movie is so bleak, so violent, and so frustrating that it almost dares you to recoil, and yet that discomfort feels deliberate. Dustin Hoffman plays David, a repressed academic whose refusal to confront conflict pushes the audience to scream at the screen, God, just do something. And normally I'd take that as a flaw, but here it seems intentional. Hoffman is a milquetoast little coward, and the film forces us to sit with that. Watching him squirm and smirk while pretending he's in control is kind of infuriating, which is the point, I think. Maybe I recognize too much of myself in him, which makes my own frustration cut a little bit deeper than I'd like to admit. Of course, the film's most infamous scene, the assault on Amy, David's wife, is where most discussions begin and end with this film. Quentin Tarantino once called it the best scene in the history of cinema, which is about as provocative as you'd expect, but he's not wrong that it forces a confrontation with the audience, even in 2025. Desensitized as we all are, the sequence genuinely shocked me. And then there's the finale of this movie, 30 minutes of chaotic, brutal home invasion mayhem that had me holding my breath even as the filmmaking itself kind of frustrated me. Peckinpah's editing during this sequence is wild, the continuity is tossed aside, the camera is jerking around in the dark, and I kept wavering between admiration for the sheer intensity and annoyance at how messy it all felt. It's tense, no doubt, but It's tense like a bombardment, not a slow-burning build, which leaves me torn on this whole movie. I can't call Straw Dogs a masterclass because I've seen films since then that refined what it's doing in a more elegant way, but there's undeniable power here. It drew me in, it locked me down, and then left me kind of conflicted. Exactly, I suspect, as Peckinpah intended. Double Indemnity really took me by surprise. It's only my second Billy Wilder film after Sunset Boulevard, and wow, the twists and turns here are just pure fun to watch unfold. The framing device of Walter Neff confessing into a dictaphone about the murder he's committed is such a bold way to structure a story. And from there, watching how the plan comes together feels refreshingly unique. And when it looks like they've actually pulled it off, I found myself thinking, well, damn, that's pretty airtight, especially considering the limitations of police work in the 1940s. But then along comes Barton Keyes, played by Edward G. Robinson, just eating this role alive. He's slowly peeling back the layers of what doesn't add up about this accidental death. The way he ratchets the tension is just masterful. You know that Walter and Phyllis aren't going to get away with it. The movie literally opens with him bleeding out. But there's still such a nagging sense that maybe, just maybe, they found a loophole that nobody can close. And then Keyes drops a line like,
he had accident insurance, didn't he? Yeah, then he broke his leg, didn't he? So what? And he didn't put in a claim. Why didn't he put in a claim? Why?
And I'm sitting on my couch like, oh shit, you're right, Keyes, you're absolutely right, you absolute insurance savant. At that point, I couldn't wait to see how he dismantled Walter and Phyllis's perfect little plan. And that's honestly one of the movie's neatest little tricks. You end up rooting against the protagonist. Fred MacMurray and Barbara Stanwyck are scheming, charismatic, and watchable as hell, but I was totally Team Keyes the entire time. Robinson gives this role such vitality. He's basically the moral center of the film, and watching him circle closer and closer to the truth is kind of electrifying. And on top of that, the noir style is gorgeous. The shadows, the blinds, the cigarette smoke. It's the kind of moody black and white cinematography that makes you want to pause the movie and frame it on your wall. The performances are a mix of intoxicatingly sharp and hilariously of their time, like Fred MacMurray calling Barbara Stanwyck baby every 3 seconds, or the overly poetic narration, which had me cracking up in the best of ways. There's definitely laughing at this movie sometimes, but there's also laughing with it, especially with those deliciously sharp exchanges. Like Phyllis saying,
I think you're rotten.
I think you're swell, so long as I'm not your husband.
And there's that car flirtation scene where they volley back and forth like it's a tennis match. The dialogue is so quick and energetic, you can't look away, even when it gets absurd. If I have any gripes, they're kind of minor. The love story leans heavy on that old Hollywood trope of, well, hey, we just met, but I'd kill for you, darling, which hasn't exactly aged gracefully. All in all, this is just a cracking good noir, one that's stylish, funny, and wickedly entertaining. Wilder really knew how to hook an audience, and I'm even more excited to dig into the rest of his filmography. Charlie Chaplin's The Kid from 1921 was his first full-length feature, and it's a landmark not just for Chaplin, but for film history. Mixing slapstick comedy with heavy drama, it tells the story of the tramp unexpectedly becoming the guardian of an abandoned child, played by Jackie Coogan, in what's often called the first true child star performance. The tenderness between Chaplin and Coogan, combined with Chaplin's mastery of physical comedy, makes the film a cultural touchstone. A whole century later, its blend of pathos and humor still feels remarkably fresh, a reminder of why audiences flock to Chaplin in the first place and why the movie has endured as one of the great silent classics. Watching it today, it's astonishing how well The Kid holds up. The comedy feels timeless. Gags like the window con hustle or the kid's fight with a bully could still get laughs in any theater, and the drama still lands like a punch to the gut. 1 minute you're laughing, the next you're blinking back tears as the kid is torn away to an orphanage. Even at home, alone in my apartment, double fisting Oreos into my mouth, I was fully sucked in. Chaplin flips emotion on a dime in a way that still feels kind of unmatched. I often wrestle with whether to hand out a full 5 stars to a movie because it could feel a little cheap to crown something a masterpiece just because it's old and wearing a monocle in the Criterion collection. But no, the kid really is emblematic of why we still pile into theaters in the first place. Humor, heartbreak, family, that forward tilt propulsion of the medium itself, and the kind of inspiration that makes you think, oh, right, this is why movies exist. Jean-Pierre Melville's Le Samourai is a cornerstone of modern crime cinema, establishing the blueprint for nearly every stylish assassin thriller that followed. Alain Delon stars as Jeff Costello, a cool, enigmatic hitman navigating the world of surveillance, betrayal, and meticulous routines. The film's influence is undeniable. Its minimalistic style, its precise framing, and spare futuristic score have been endlessly imitated. Now, as a firm believer that cinema only gets better over time, not worse, like some folks believe, this movie is kind of a prime example to me. Now, don't get me wrong, it takes a lot of work to be seen as influential, but it also takes a particular amount of luck. Watching this film today, you could see its DNA in films ranging from David Fincher's The Killer to Nicholas Winding Refn's Drive, which makes it an essential piece of cinematic history. But that said, the pacing is very much a 1960s French affair. It's deliberate, but it's almost languid. And the first half really requires patience as it sets up the methodical world that Jeff inhabits. As a fun coincidence, I did watch this around the same time as Jim Jarmusch's Ghost Dog, 2 very different films about assassins following a samurai code, which made for a fascinating double feature on discipline and honor and existential coolness. As for my personal take, I wrestled a bit with Jeff as a character. He's impossibly cool and stylish, yet some of his decisions, like casually walking into a crowded building to commit a murder, felt frustratingly implausible. The film's sleek cinematography and atmospheric score elevate the proceedings, but there was a lack of emotional depth for Jeff that left me scratching my head in the final moments. And still, even with all of those reservations, Le Samourai is a mesmerizing study in style, mood, and precision, and its influence is easy to admire. For all of its cool, detached elegance, it's a film that reminds you why Melville is considered to be among the masters of crime cinema. Peter Weir's Picnic at Hanging Rock is a haunting Australian mystery that helped establish Weir as a major director in the 1970s. The film follows a group of schoolgirls who vanish during a picnic at the titular Hanging Rock, leaving their teachers and the entire community in a state of panic and confusion. Shot with stunning cinematography that captures both the ethereal beauty and unsettling strangeness of the Australian landscape, the film blends period piece detail with an almost dreamlike sensibility. From what I understand, its release came at a time when Australian cinema was beginning to gain international attention, and it's now regarded as a classic of both the mystery and art house genres. The film's ambiguity sort of reinforces the enduring mystique, and it makes Hanging Rock itself feel like a character in the movie. Enigmatic, alluring, and dangerous. Now, watching it, I was struck by how immersive and surprisingly accessible it is, despite its reputation for being opaque or quote-unquote highbrow. The sequences of the girls wandering the rock are mesmerizing, filled with dread and beauty, and the performances, particularly by Anne Lambert as Miranda, are grounded and captivating to watch. Now, at times, the story feels repetitive, and the ending is anticlimactic in the sense that it offers no tidy resolution, but that ambiguity is also its strength. Picnic at Hanging Rock was lingering in my mind long after the credits were rolling, with its mix of haunting visuals, ethereal score, and a narrative restraint that kept the mystery alive. For a film that I expected to be a slow, stuffy period piece, it moved with surprising vigor, and it left me wanting to revisit it with fresh eyes. So we're getting toward the end, and just the other day I watched The Thief of Baghdad, and wow, I loved this movie. This is that kind of movie that has that magical transportive quality, the kind of thing that would have blown my fucking mind as a kid. It's got flying carpets, a giant genie, a guy named Jafar. You may have picked up on it, but this is kind of an early version of Aladdin, and it totally works. The Technicolor is gorgeous with colors that just burst off the screen, and the visual effects with miniatures, superimpositions, and early blue screen work are surprisingly effective even today. It's easy to see why this film won the Oscar for Best Visual Effects. The pacing is great too. For a film that jumps between so many locations, introduces tons of characters, and stages these huge set pieces like Abu fighting a giant spider to get an all-seeing eye, for example, it never drags. The cast is fantastic. Sabu is endlessly charming as Abu, the Aladdin stand-in in this movie. Conrad Veidt is delightfully menacing as Jafar, and Rex Ingram absolutely stole the show for me as the genie with his commanding attention the second that he appears. Watching this as an adult, I could appreciate both the technical achievements and the sheer fun of the story. The film has that timeless, fable-like quality, and it's one of those movies where you just get swept away in it. I honestly can't believe it took me this long to see it. The Thief of Baghdad is pure movie magic. It's joyful, it's inventive, and endlessly entertaining. It's the kind of film that reminds you exactly why you fell in love with movies in the first place. Memories of Murder is widely considered to be Bong Joon-ho's early masterpiece, and it's about the hunt for a serial killer in 1980s rural South Korea. The film follows three detectives, each with a very different approach to crime solving as they try and fail to pin down an elusive murderer. Based on true events, it captures the tension and frustration of a case that never gets solved, and Bong blends dark humor, tragedy, and suspense in a way that keeps you invested from start to finish. The rain-soaked landscapes, the quiet countryside, and thoughtful cinematography give the film this hypnotic, almost meditative quality, while the narrative twists and dead ends make it genuinely gripping. Spiritually, it reminded me a lot of David Fincher's Zodiac. It has that same sense of obsession, futility, and procedural frustration that lingers long after the credits roll. And what really struck me in this movie was the pacing and the emotional impact. The film constantly alternates between slow, methodical investigation and sudden bursts of tension or revelation, keeping you off balance the whole time. The detectives' failures feel personal, and by the end, you share in their frustration and exhaustion. At the same time, like always, Bong Joon-ho finds room for small moments of levity and humanity that make the stakes feel even higher. The ending of this movie is quietly devastating, almost cruelly poetic, and leaves you reflecting on the weight of obsession, duty, and the impossibility of fully understanding the world. Memories of Murder, I would say, is tense, it's beautiful, and emotionally resonant, a modern classic of the thriller genre from a director who has become widely respected today. So just the other day, I watched Black Girl, Ousmane Sembene's first feature, and a film often called the start of African cinema as we know it. At just under an hour, this film is deceptively short, but packs quite an emotional punch. The story follows Diwana, a young woman from Dakar, Senegal, who takes a job with a French family, and when that family moves back to France, she goes with them, imagining adventure and opportunity, but the reality is far harsher. Instead of the glamorous life she envisioned, she becomes isolated, treated like a servant, and constantly reminded that she doesn't belong. There's a moment in the film where there's a lunch party and a guest grabs her to kiss her cheeks, saying he's never kissed a black woman before. And it hits you with this uncomfortable, lingering weight, even all of these decades later. Watching this, I couldn't help but think of a film that I watched earlier this year, Alambrista, a film about a Mexican immigrant facing a similar dehumanizing reality abroad. Both films show the quiet despair of seeking opportunity and finding confinement instead. What makes Black Girl so remarkable is how Sembene accomplishes all of this in under an hour. There's this French New Wave influence camera that floats around and lingers, capturing Diwana's beauty and her burden simultaneously. Flashbacks to Dakar give the audience a taste of the life that she left behind with this heightening sense of loss. The 4K Criterion restoration makes every frame of this movie striking, and the ending, without giving too much away, is abrupt, it's bleak, and it's kind of unforgettable. I left this film wanting more of the Ioana, wanting to know her better, which may very well be the point. Black Girl is short, it's devastating, and still urgently relevant today. And now we get to the final film, which is Akira Kurosawa's Dreams. This year, I finally dove into Kurosawa, and Dreams is only my third film of his that I've seen. Honestly, I'm of two minds about it. I wouldn't recommend this as a first Kurosawa for anyone to watch. The film is broken up into 8 short stories, and about half of them left me feeling a little bit drowsy because they're soft and they're meandering, and they have these lingering shots that go on longer than I was able to keep engaged. Some sequences are genuinely haunting, like the story of 4 mountaineers trapped in a blizzard facing what seems like death itself, yet others are more puzzling than moving. The stories are all chock full of ethereal imagery, unanswerable questions, and surreal symbolism, which makes the film intriguing but also somewhat impenetrable at times. On the other hand, Dreams is absolutely gorgeous from top to bottom. Kurosawa's cinematography pops off the screen, and certain sequences, like the section titled Crows, where a man steps into Vincent van Gogh's paintings and even meets the artist played by Martin Scorsese, it's just pure delight. The film feels whimsical, inventive, and at times almost like a visual poem. But beyond the individual sequences, there's a sense of Kurosawa's legendary creative freedom. You could see why he's so revered and how his daring, experimental approach continues to influence filmmakers decades later. Again, I wouldn't suggest Dreams as an introduction to his work, but within his career, it seems like a singular, unique piece, something confusing, sometimes magical, but always inspiring. And I can imagine coming back to this when I'm in need of a little creative spark or a dose of cinematic imagination. Oh boy. That's going to do it for this stretch of the Criterion Challenge of 2025. Looking back on all of the films I watched, it's wild to see all of the variety, everything from silent classics like The Kid to brutal, tense thrillers like Sam Peckinpah's Straw Dogs to haunting period mysteries like Picnic at Hanging Rock and grounded, devastating crime dramas like The Friends of Eddie Coyle. Each one of these movies reminded me why I love cinema so much, how it can transport you, it can challenge you, it can make you think, and sometimes just leave you in awe. Doing something like the Criterion Challenge is such a great way to stay active as a cinephile. It forces you to watch films you might not have picked up on your own, to wrestle with stories and styles and push you to notice connections that you otherwise might miss. And to be completely honest, it's exhausting at times, but in the best way. And with the final quarter of the year coming up, I'm so excited for what's next. I've got a lot of films queued up. I've got discoveries that I haven't made yet. And honestly, I get the chance to keep learning and questioning and just get lost in the movies. So here's to that. If you like what I do here on the channel, please consider hitting the subscribe button and hitting the bell to be notified when new videos come out on the channel. You can follow me on Letterboxd to see what I watch, when I watch it, and let me know if you are participating in the Criterion Challenge down in the comments, and let me know what's been your favorite thing that you've watched in 2025 for the challenge. And yeah, that's going to do it for me. I'll see you all next time.